Okay, so are we all ready? Well, good morning to everybody, and to those of you joining us on this really lovely Saturday morning here on YouTube. Welcome to the Yellow Springs Board of Education work session, Saturday, November 21st. I've instructed the board to become properly caffeinated for this early morning Saturday session. Just as a reminder to anybody who may be with us this morning, work sessions are the opportunity for the board to have discussions. We take no actions, no votes are conducted. We don't put motions on the table. This is an opportunity really for information sharing, for discussion, for debate, and to think about things that we might act on in the future. Because of that, we do not invite community comments at a work session the way we do at a regular board meeting. So those people who may want to have questions or want to further discussions, please contact us outside the meeting. We'd be happy to do that, but we won't recognize you during the meeting itself. So with that by way of preliminaries, let us go ahead and call the roll, please.
Khan.
Here.
Verhemick.
Here.
Ellison.
Present.
McQueen. Turner.
Here.
Okay. So we are here today to discuss our facilities and our facilities plan, or planning to have a facilities plan, because we were making some forward motion on this, as many of you know, until March, and then something happened in March, which I can't now recall, but we got derailed. And so we are now taking this opportunity to get this process back on track, because again, as everybody knows, our facilities aren't getting any better and they need attention as soon as it is possible. So Terry, do you want to start us with this?
I sure do. So,
okay, take it away.
Thank you, board. You know, I have a presentation and Tammy has a presentation that and our presentations dovetail, but I think it's pretty comprehensive, but as I go along, if you have any questions, just stop me because I know I've thrown a lot at you. Okay, Steph. So for me, this was, Steve, that was a nice capture. Steph, you can progress, please. That was a nice capture of kind of where we were in March and then what happened. So in March, we, the board passed a resolution to work with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, and then it was kind of a full stop. So I want to revisit the past, even beyond, you know, more historical than just last March, but several years ago, because I wasn't here. So I had to try to get some understanding of what happened. So in 2018, we actually did a bond issue. And what I provided for you here is the actual referendum question. So it was, do the voters approve a 25% income tax increase and then a 4.7 mil, looks like here because I can't see my whole screen, 4.7 mil levy to pay for a 712 renovation and partial replacement of the 712 facility. Okay, Steph. And those of you who are here know better than me about that. So this was the vote. So we lost pretty handily. And I think we know that, and so that's for me. Now I kind of have a little bit of an understanding of what happened, but here we are now. And so what I have to do is I have to say, okay, we're almost 4 years down the road, 3.5, certainly from the building assessment. So where are we going to go from here? So that's how I want to kind of present this to you in terms of looking at our overall facility needs. Okay. All right, Steph. There's a little delay, so
Yep.
Maybe she's Steph, can you hear me?
Oh, she looks frozen.
She is frozen. So I can tell you right now what we're going to do is we're going to go into Tammy's presentation, because what Tammy's going to do is she's going to lay out the finances, kind of where are we financially. And Steph knows it's time now to, there we go. All right, thanks for your patience with this. Okay, Tammy, you're on.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is our timeline. And if you could go to the next slide, Steph, when you get a chance. So we have debt limitations. And we have a signed ELPP agreement, which is the Expedited Local Partnership Agreement. So we can qualify for the exemption from the debt limitations, which is pretty important to us. And that agreement, so we have the first agreement with the ELPP, and then there's another agreement that goes to the controlling board, and that would be done in the June timeframe. So we would have to have that one done in the June timeframe to be in place by August 4th for the deadline for the November 2nd, 2021 election. And then we have some options. And I apologize because this is kind of small for me to see, so I'm assuming it's kind of small for you all to see too. So in 2018, we ran a combined bond and PI tax levy for the bond. And this was not part of the OFCC project. And my understanding is that we split it due to the debt limitations.
Tammy, I think she's trying to get you on present mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not letting me.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm the one who I put in the chat. Like, if it could be bigger, that would be great. I can also just like open it separately, I guess. But
So we were not able to qualify for those debt limitation exemptions last time, which is one of the reasons why we split it into an income tax. So now we're looking at an OFCC sanctioned project and the ELP program. So that means we would be exempt from the debt limits. So that means we could either be a full property tax, or we could split it again between the property tax and the income tax. So that's one decision that we'll have to make. And then another item we need to determine is how we're going to maintain the buildings. So we'll have an OFCC maintenance obligation at some point, not right away because we're not in their regular program. So we have some options in order to raise the money for that maintenance. So we could run a $500,000 PI levy with a bond issue as a combined question, and we could earmark that for the OFCC maintenance until the time came. Or we could wait until we get into the regular OFCC program, which is estimated to be about 10 years down the road, and pass an issue at that point in time. But personally, I would not wait until then because we're going to be maintaining the buildings from day one when they go online. And I think we need to have a revenue stream in order to do that. And then I also have some other options. Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, I was going to say so, a couple points here. One, and I don't remember the debt limit being the reason why we split it. I think there was a lot of discussion early on, and I actually wasn't. I was deployed when the bond issue was actually kind of decided upon. But when I came back, I believe the income tax reason was to help offset the fact that you would have people on limited incomes, right, who own their properties, and so that was a kind of offset in the village when you had folks who were not, on a fixed income, right? No longer, they were retired perhaps and just living in the property and not getting taxed out of their house. So I think that was one of the driving forces, at least how it was communicated. And then certainly in the bond levy issue, one of the larger talking points against the bond was that there wasn't a great plan in place for the maintenance portion. So I think, to your point, anything that we do that shows that we're taking care of that piece at the same time would be a real advantage.
Okay. Next slides, please, Stephanie. Oh my gosh, it's too early this morning. So just for the property tax, and Terry will go over a lot of this, but we're looking at least a $30 million bond issue. So just for property tax, $30 million would be around 8.52 mils. And then a 32 million bond issue would be around 9.08 mils. And a $33 million bond issue would be around 9.37 mils. So the cost to a homeowner of a $200,000 appraised home for 9.37 mils would be about $655.74 a year. So keep in mind, with a bond issue, we put this on the ballot, and it's really estimated because what the county auditor does is they levy the millage in order to retire the bond debt for that year. So every year we go through a calculation. The county auditor asks for information, and I give them to him. And then they calculate what our millage is going to be for the bond debt for the next year. So it may start out at 9.37 mils, but that's going to gradually decrease over time. So it wouldn't be the full 9.37 mils forever. So that's just the property tax. So another option is property income tax. And I have a whole sheet detailing all these options in the Google Drive. So if we did a 0.25% traditional income tax and a 7.5 mil property tax, that would support $33 million. Or if we did a 0.5% traditional income tax, and this is the all income, that would be a 5.64 mil property tax. That would support a $33 million bond issue.
Tammy, are we at 1.5% income tax now?
No, we're at 1%. So our levies, so this is something to think about. So we have 2 emergency levies expiring December 31st, 2024. We have a PI levy of 1.2 mils, and that expires on December 31st of 2022. So this levy currently generates around $145,000, and it can be first renewed in November 2022. We have a bond levy that expires at the end of 2026, and then we have the traditional income tax levy of 1%, which is continuing. And then some of the maintenance options are we could separate the PI levy either before or after the bond issue. We could do a separate PI levy. Or, and here's another thing that we could do, is we could renew our current PI levy with an increase. We could make it permanent, which is continuing, and we could keep the homestead and rollback on the current 1.2 mils. And the legislation was passed a few years ago that took away that homestead and rollback exemption. So you have to be careful with your current levies and how you proceed, because there's some things that you could do that you would lose that, and you don't want to lose that because that would be a cost to the taxpayer. Are there any more slides, Steph? I'm thinking not. Can you go back to the last one then?
There are no more. The levies.
The previous one. So thank you. So just for, in laying out the levies and some of our future planning. So if we look at this and we're looking at a bond issue for new buildings, renovate buildings, November 2021. So we have that. We have a PI levy that we need to renew. First time we can go is November 2022. And then we have emergency levies, and we can go, if we convert those emergency levies to substitute emergency levies, we can do that at any point in time. So if you look at this, and unfortunately we'd be on the ballot a lot, but if we go in November 2021 for the bond issue, we go in November of 2022 for the PI levy, and then we go in November of 2023 for the substitute emergency levy. So that's a little bit how I see it laying out. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first is that I'm wondering. So TJ is right. Let me go back 2 steps. TJ his memory is the same as my memory, which is that we split the bond. Let's start this all over again. Okay. My recollection is the same as TJ's. That is to say that one of the concerns that people expressed last time around was a maintenance plan. And I do not recall that when we were discussing this with the OFCC that even came up. So this is new information for me at any rate when I was reviewing this stuff yesterday. And I think that's quite interesting. So I'm wondering how a maintenance plan that gets built into the process working with the OFCC might somehow interact with these other levies, which is money we often use for roof repairs and other such things. Can these be dovetailed somehow in a way to maybe streamline and declutter all of this?
Well, normally if my understanding is correct, what you normally do is you would pass the bond issue, and then you'd also have the maintenance as part of that in the same wording. So, I mean, you could do that. We could also, when we renew the PI levy, increase that millage. That's an option.
I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is if we pass a maintenance plan, if that becomes rolled into the bond issue for the construction project itself, do we need all of these levies that you've got here in slide 6, or do we need them at the same amount?
Yes, we would still need these levies.
Okay.
Yes.
And isn't can someone help me remember which are the ones we've been doing steps to align into one bigger one?
Mm-hmm.
The 2 emergency levies, we did that on purpose with.
Thank
And
you.
Those are operating levies.
Correct. Yeah, Tammy,
Yeah.
that would be helpful for especially anybody listening in. Could you go over what we use these for? I mean, I think the first 2 are operating, right, for salaries and benefits. The permanent improvement is what we do repairs and buses and things like that on. The bond levy is for the upgrade of high school, and then our income tax is also part of operations.
Yes.
Is
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think there's a misnomer. People see the emergency part of the emergency levy. Always discussion about that, and it's
Yeah,
the type.
that's I think that I'm glad you brought that up again, because it's always problematic terminology. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just a type of levy, and I think people get confused. Steve, I want to go back to your comment about you weren't remembering the required $500,000 PI. As far as I can ascertain, the plan that went to the voters in 2018 was not an OFCC plan.
Yeah.
I think there were early discussions, but then there was no official agreement to proceed with the OFCC.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's how I remember it as well.
And I think there was some of the rationale for that was the building requirements, right? What OFCC needed, the percentage new, and what we could do in terms of doing an upgrade and an add-on to the high school. That was partially what drove that decision, if I'm remembering right.
Okay.
Any other questions? So those are some of the decisions that we need to make, because we'll need to have everything as far as our plan done in the May-June timeframe, because the levy deadlines are in July and August in order to get it on the ballot.
Tammy, actually, before we let you go just now, maybe one final question. You started off the presentation with 3 variations that sort of increased, 30 million, 33 million. Can you just explain to all of us where those numbers come from?
I can.
Oh, okay. I'll let Terry go.
Those
Oh,
are,
okay.
that's part of what I'm getting to, Steve.
Okay. Fine.
So, Tammy and I really need to be like these conjoined twins speaking together. So I feel like it was important for Tammy to give everyone the financial overlay. So now Steph's gonna jump back to my presentation and I want to.
Terry,
I'm sorry.
just before we leave the financial part, on that slide 4 that Tammy had, I think another point that gets missed and is important to bring out is the appraised value is different than your entire home value, right? The appraised value is actually just about 30%. Is that what it is, Tammy?
Well, actually, there's an appraised value that's set by the county auditor. And then in order to levy taxes, they take 35% of that, which is the assessed valuation.
Okay. So which one are you? So the assessed valuation is what you pay your taxes on, though, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So I think people also see this, like they see the millage and they think that's on the entire value of their property when it's really on the 35% of that value.
Right. So in this example, it would be 200,000, but it's not the full 200,000. It's 35% of that.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's another misconception that gets out there, is that these, like a 9 mil levy is almost 3 times more expensive than what it actually is to the individual homeowner. So I think that's just to clarify once more out there. Thank you.
Okay, Steph. So I want to do some explanation of, next slide, please, of some of these terms that Tammy was using and that I have used about our work so far with the OFCC. And so that since we passed a resolution in March, the OFCC kind of did a shutdown because of the pandemic. They are back now working. Late October, we received our official eligibility letter. So Tammy and I have met now twice with our OFCC consultant. Go ahead, Steph, about our participation in the ELP program. And so what that is the Expedited Local Partnership Program. Can you move me? Thank you. So just what does that mean? So if you see on this first bullet, ELP participants are at least 2 years away from Classroom Facilities Assistance Programs, CFAP. Well, what does that mean? So what the OFCC does is they provide an equity list of all districts in the state. And your place on that equity list is dependent upon their assessment, which includes some assessment of property wealth and other factors. But your place on that list is determined by the ability of your local community to raise your local share. So if you think in simple terms, in general, because as we know, there are tremendous exceptions to this, in general, the wealthier a community, the more likely they are to be able to come up with their local share. So what you see on the CFAP list sometimes are districts that have low property wealth, high poverty, et cetera. And so that determines your share of state assistance. So with CFAP, it's assistance in real time. So if I, let's say we were a district that qualified for CFAP, it might be if we raise 60%, the OFCC will contribute 40%. Because of our wealth factors, we are pretty low on that, on the CFAP list. However, we do qualify for Expedited Local Partnership Program. And what that is that if you are more than 2 years away from getting CFAP money, you can qualify for this. That's us. I would say we're probably 10 years conservatively. So what that means is that for the portion of our building project, whether it's new or a major renovation, as long as it meets OFCC guidelines, we would be eligible for this later deduction. And for us right now, it's 26%. When we became eligible for CFAP. So let's say we put a bond issue on, it passed, we're working, our project is complete. 10 years down the road, we qualify for CFAP. The OFCC comes in and says, okay, now it's time for us to repay your ELP assistance. So our consultant said, you know, they've been doing it, figuring out over how many years are we going to repay you. That has been their previous approach, but they have since started looking at districts who are able to fund their whole project, get it complete, and if there's no other involvement from the OFCC, so enrollment didn't change to require anything, a credit or a deduction, they're like, okay, you did your part. It's easier for us just to write you a check and get you off our books. So does that piece make sense? Okay. Okay.
Well,
So,
I mean, it makes sense up to a point. I mean, this is, I guess I would just want to stress that this is a really Byzantine maze to negotiate here with all of the acronyms and the various ways this all goes. So yes, you're doing an admirable job laying it all out for us, but it is fuzzy around the edges.
and please ask questions and I will explain as best I can. And again, the way I look at this is, you know, you hired me to lead the district and make some decisions about where we're going to go, which includes our facilities. And so in trying to understand what happened in the past, it was clear to me that the expense was an issue. So in my mind, whether we get it now or we get it later, any number is greater than zero.
Yep.
So in my mind, that is absolutely a positive. So that's why I think the ELP program, it's the only one we qualify for, and we might as well take advantage of it. Okay, Steph. So in ELP, and I know I overwhelmed you with a lot of documents in the drive, and I certainly did not expect you to read all of them prior to today, but it's really more for reference. But there are 4 phases. Phase 1 is actually what we did in March, right? We reached out, we met with them, the board passed a resolution, etc. We've received our official eligibility letter. We can check that off. We are now in phase 2. So what phase 2 is, we have to revisit really the work that was done for the 2018 bond issue. So I say that it was done by the OFCC and then the district pulled back. So when I say the work that was done, they did an enrollment projection. That's required for any project. They did facilities assessments. So our facilities assessments are from 2017, and I'll cycle back to that. So they will, we've already submitted new enrollment numbers. They're going to revise that. They are looking again at our facilities piece. They won't do a completely new facilities assessment. However, they will take input from us and from our pre-bond architect, which we are in the process of obtaining services of a pre-bond architect. We put out the RFQ, and those applications are due on Tuesday. So that's where we are. At the end of this presentation, I have a little timeline, and I'll show you where that phase might stop, and we go into phase 3 starts once your bond issue passes, right? So we're in phase 2 until that time. Okay, Steph. So like I said, facilities assessment, enrollment projections, master facilities plan. So the reason we need a pre-bond architect is so that we can work as a school community and really look at what is going to meet the needs of the district? What's going to meet the needs of the district based upon our size? What's going to meet the needs of the district based upon our vision? What's going to meet the needs of the district based upon what we know about education? Particularly, I think the past 10 months have really shown us a lot. So I think all of that is good information to inform kind of where we go with facilities. Okay. So this screen and my cryptic numbers. When you work with the OFCC, they have what they call a renovate to replace ratio. So what they say is, if the renovate to replace ratio is greater than if the renovation cost is greater than 2/3 of the cost to build new, they are going to require you to build new. If for some reason you do not want to, you have to submit a waiver. Typically, waivers are only given for, you might have a building that has historical value, right? It's on the National Register, and so you want to keep part of that. But other than that, I think, Tammy, correct me if I'm not remembering, but I think that's the big reason. They do it rarely. They don't like to do it. 80 to 89 on the 5 draft plans that the OFCC sent that I've shared with you, we range between 80 to 89%. So as you can see, we are well over that limit. Sylvia, you have your hand up.
I just, I'm sorry, I wasn't good at pushing my little buttons there, but yeah, I wanted to just follow back on a little part you said a minute ago about the waiver. Mm-hmm. It's kind of back when, maybe it was last year, or maybe it was the year before, or maybe it was both times at OSBA. And I know some of us had tried to really go to sessions. Some board members really tried to make sure to go to sessions about this kind of thing. And the renovation versus new build financing options, you know, the way we could leverage money that's available through these kinds of programs. And I do remember one really good example that was given to really illustrate that a waiver isn't just sort of a casual, you know, we just don't want to do that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Where one school district, they did have this particular kind of tower that was really important to the community that had been part of a school. And so their waiver allowed them to incorporate that mm-hmm. into a new building, but that it's for that kind of thing only. It's not really just to get past the obvious financial decision that's in that, you know, that you're showing us with these numbers here, you know, being way off in terms of the cost to renovate versus to rebuild.
Right.
So thanks for pointing that out.
No problem. Okay, Steph. Sorry about the delay. I don't know. It's just a little hard in this remote environment. Okay, so I shared 5 plans with you. And I'm going to want, so you all have these, and it was way too much to put in this presentation. But if Stephanie can, I would like her to, well, how about this? Do you want me to go into detail of some of these, or do you want me to finish this and then we can cycle back to that? Because it would involve us getting out of this little presentation.
I would vote for that option. Let's get to the end of the presentation and cycle back.
Okay. All right. So just know that there were 5 plans that draft plans, again, based upon our enrollment from 2017 and the facilities assessment. So they are, I can tell you the first one is just a new K-12. And here's the reason for that. based upon numbers, the OFC recommends certain types of buildings. So they really do not like to build new buildings for less than 350 students, period. If a district size is less than 1,500, they prefer a single building. Excuse me, a single campus that might have different kind of prongs. So what you see in all of these is, I can tell you number one is a new K-12. 2, 3, 4, and 5 are variations of partial new builds and renovations. And Tammy's 30 to 33 is really based on this, because they run from 29 and change for number one to 28 to 29 to 29. So they're all relatively close when you're talking about that dollar amount. Okay, Steph. And I have all of those in the folder for you as well. Okay, so all of that is good, but we got to know where we're going. And so we've talked about the strategic plan for the class of 2020, which graduated in May, and kind of how we might go from here. And so I know a lot of work was done to put this plan together. A large number of people involved, engagement with the community, and we came up with 6 priorities in this strategic plan. Go ahead. So as I was reading the plan and trying to check off, okay, what have we accomplished of that plan? I noticed that there were kind of big gaps. So here I've spelled out each priority here for you. And so what you see, the bullet points are straight out of the strategic plan. What you see in parentheses, I'm connecting to that draft visioning document that I put in the folder. And so that came from my initial meeting with staff at the start of this year, because I think it's really hard for employees to work without knowing where they're going. And so on that document, the mission says, make sure our students succeed. Well, you can see that that's kind of embedded in the overall mission of the 2020 strategic plan. Raise academic achievement of all students. That's in the mission of this visioning document this draft, I want to emphasize that, this draft visioning document that I shared with staff in August. Prepare students for civic responsibilities to society. That's in core values. So on this visioning document, what are our core values? Recognizing the humanity in all of us, anti-racism, equity, and opportunity, diversity of thought, perseverance and adaptability, community, global perspective. So I'm trying to connect this back to that. The next part of the priority 1 of the strategic plan was develop self-directed learners who will succeed in a competitive world. That really is, how are we providing a quality education to our children so they can go out and thrive? Okay, Steph. So I want to make sure that you understand the bullet points are straight out of the 2020 strategic plan, and in parentheses are kind of cross references to this draft visioning piece I have. Create an innovative teaching and learning model. Strengthen the curriculum. Well, board, I've talked about this all year, and we have a pretty steep hill to climb there. And we've been working really hard on that. Increase student choice. So what outcomes do we want from our plan? So authentic work for students, collaboration and engagement, more personalized learning. I think we've really discovered that as part of this pandemic. And then quantitative and qualitative success measures. How are we going to know that we are successful? Okay, Steph. Priority 3 is really about staffing. How do we kind of live our values and say, we believe in diversity, and our staff is a reflection of that. So, that's ongoing work, but I think we have a good, we're on that path, might I say. Okay. Priority 4 is about funding the future. That's important. I'm not sure I have a clear understanding of what the intent was in the 2020 strategic plan, but that certainly was a priority. I mean, clearly it is important to fund the future and make sure that the district is sustainable. Priority 5 is really what's our learning infrastructure? How do we create a physical, technological environment to align with our curriculum, align with our pedagogical approach, align with community values? And again, that's cross-referenced with that visioning draft document. And then priority 6 was explore new structures for the educational system. And if I'm not mistaken, I think in that part it was new structures, meaning focused areas, STEM, the arts, etc. So does that make sense?
Yep.
So my point is, we had this rather lengthy. You can go to the next slide, Steph. We had this rather lengthy 2020 strategic plan that has expired. We need to know where we're going. My recommendation to the board is to work with staff and others who may be interested and take that draft visioning document, which comes out of the strategic plan, and really strengthen that so that our focus is much more narrow and future oriented, so that we can say, okay, as we use what we've learned during this pandemic and remote learning time, as we prepare to engage in discussions about facilities, how do we have some touchstone to say, this is where we're going, does this meet our needs or not? In the visioning document is really this project-based learning, inquiry learning is central to that. And that was part of the strategic plan. So I guess my point is, what's on the visioning document, none of that has come out of left field. It's really all come out of the 2020 strategic plan. But I feel like it's much more focused so that we can say, here was our goal, we accomplished that. We set out to do these 3 things, and you know what? We did these 3 things, and we did these 3 things well. That becomes an important piece, along with community engagement, as we go into the master facilities planning process. Okay, Steph. So what I've provided you here is really a little, I think the next screen is a go ahead, a timeline. So how does this look as we go forward? Go ahead. So you can see, here's where we are. Nope. November 2020, we are discussing our future facilities path. The OFCC is working on revised enrollment projections and any tweaks to the facility assessments. We already have an RFQ out for our pre-bond architect. As I mentioned before, we'll get that in on Tuesday, and then the board will make a decision for that. Why is that important? Because then we can start working with someone who really does this and can say, hey, here I'm looking at, as an architect who's worked with schools, I'm looking at all of this, I'm seeing what your vision or intended vision is. I'm in your facilities, and here's where we're going to go. So next month, I'm going to recommend kind of simultaneously, we work on both of those. January then starts this kind of community engagement, January, February, March. community engagement about the master facilities plan. And I think with a strategic plan, I want to put that in quotes. I am not recommending a strategic plan as extensive as the one we had before. I'm recommending a much shorter one because I think sometimes when they're that long, you lose sight, and it's hard to kind of get there. But with the community engagement, with the support of someone who does this, we can say, okay, here's where we're going, here's what we value, and here are the type of facilities we think we need based upon that. That work goes until really May, when I think the board, by that time, we should have a master facilities plan, get approval for that. And then in June, what we have to do is the board has to submit the master facilities plan to the OFCC. The OFCC then approves the plan. The following month, the OFCC controlling board approves the plan. That's the magic approval. So once the OFCC controlling board approves it, then we have 1 year to pass the bond issue. So that if they approved it in July at the latest, that would allow us to be on the ballot in November. Let's say we don't pass in November, that would allow us to be back on in May. If we cannot approve it then, what happens with the OFCC? So if you're a CFAP district and you can't pass it, you become what's called lapsed. So you stay in lapsed status until you pass it. Once you pass it, you jump to the front of the line if you're a CFAP eligible district. Does not work the same with ELP districts. If you do not pass it in that year, you become what's called expired. What that means is that you kind of have to go through the process all over again. It would be abbreviated because you don't necessarily need a new master facilities plan, but there's no kind of jumping to the line like a lapsed district can do if they're in the CFAP queue. Okay. And that really is my kind of big overview. So maybe questions about that, and then we can talk about any of the particular options or anything else.
This is great. This is really clear and thorough. I wonder if I could start with a question that takes us back a little bit. So you said that currently the district working with the OFCC would qualify for 26% of the cost, which on a $30 million project, by my rough guess, is about $7.5 million.
That is correct.
Okay, so could you just, so as you explained it, what happens is we would have to pass the bond, the issue, whether it's a bond or a combination of an income tax and a millage, we would have to pass that up front. Then OFCC would write us a check, which amounts to a quasi reimbursement for that 26%. How does that alter the terms of the bond that we passed? Because now...
That's a good question, and Tammy and I talked about that. Tammy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I have been working with Kent Casual from RBC, and I have not asked that question yet. I've just been kind of mulling it through in my mind as to, how we would apply those proceeds against the bond issue, but I can certainly get an answer for you.
Yeah, because in essence, then it doesn't become a $30 million package that we've passed. It becomes a $22.5 million package, which, again, just in my crude assessment of it, ought to mean a lower millage rate or a lower income tax assessment. But maybe that's not quite the way it works. So yeah, I think it would be good to learn the answer to that question, just so that we can explain that when people, because I'm sure that's going to come up.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for allowing me to kind of wade through this with you. you know, Tammy and I are pretty open about where we are in our understanding and how we're going to proceed. And so I think it's important for everyone to know that this is a big deal, a big lift. And so as we work through it, you know, I guess maybe it's scary, but you're kind of in our brains as we work through this, because this is not Terry's plan or Dr. Holden's plan or Tammy Emmerich's plan. This is really eventually will be the community's plan and the board's plan for the future of our school district. So I'm always going to tell you what I know and what I don't know. And neither the treasurer nor a superintendent is ever trained to understand facilities the way an architect is trained to understand facilities. So this is kind of where we are now, kind of in that. I've given you kind of the 30,000 foot view. Here's that view for finances. Here's that view for the ELP process. Here's where we are right now. And then we can come down from there and look more at specifics. Aida, I see your hand up too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. I don't think that there's enough clarity that can go into this process because it's quite complicated. And as you just got done saying, you aren't necessarily the experts. The board members are not necessarily the experts, even though many of us have gone through this. We've learned a lot in the process, but certainly I could never say I was an expert around this. And so when you talk about a pre-bond architect, I found myself sort of just breathing a sigh of relief, partly because they know better, I hope. And I do hope that they will, our intention initially through our long community engagement process last time was hopes that we really fully understood and took in what the community was saying. I hope that this pre-bond architect, because they have had much more experience with this, will also do that, but in a way that might be a more clearer process. So I just feel like my whole body just kind of went, So fingers crossed with that. I just want to comment about your comments about the strategic plan. I think it became, very clear probably 4 or 5 years into that plan that it was overly ambitious, that committee had worked really, really hard to put it together, but it didn't give us a whole lot of room to reassess and evaluate. I mean, we did that in part when we could, but a shorter plan and a more defined plan seems definitely like the way to go. So I appreciate you making comments about that as well. And again, I just want to similarly say that, again, I think what Steve said was, this is a complicated issue. I don't think we can know enough as we go through. So even if it's repetitive and redundant, I think it's going to be helpful in terms of clarifying and hopefully getting our community on board so they can better understand what we're going through and what we're hoping to accomplish. So thanks for this work, and I assume it will continue in a similar vein.
Yes. I'm going to ask if it's okay, Stephanie, to share a document with you that might, again, we're dropping from 30,000 feet to maybe 20,000 feet with this. So it may help. Just give her a little time. I sent her a quick text. No, not that.
Do I have to fasten my seatbelt on a descent that rapid?
That's right. That's right. You hear that? Do you hear the little dinging going on?
Yeah, right. The oxygen has dropped.
Steph, it's called Draft MFP Explanation, and it's in the November 2020 work session folder. So what this will do, they're really, in addition to the 5 plans in that folder while she's bringing this up, there are 2 documents that may be important that give you a kind of an understanding a little clearer than what OFCC language might be. And that's the one she's going to bring up, and also the MFP drafts Q&A. But she's going to bring up a little, I think, yep, let me see. Yep, this is it. So now welcome to the 20,000 foot view. So on all of these plans, they talk about, they use acronyms, etc. So I've tried to explain it a little bit in here, and then that Q&A document will explain it even more what happened. Okay. I don't want to do this yet. Can you go back to the other one? Yeah. Okay. So we talked about renovate to replace cost, right? The 67% threshold. So my second bullet says, the assessments are from 2017, and I'll show you where in each of the plans it talks about, it rates each category, satisfactory, poor, and it's based upon a percentage. We all know what happens when time elapses, the buildings don't get better. So that's kind of the way that works. Cost sets. So the cost sets are the OFCC updates them. These are from last year. So when they update them for 2020 and 2021, there could be a slight change. So with all of these plans, if you work with the OFCC, the minimum expectation is that you meet LEED Silver requirements. So if you look at the new building plan or even the renovation ones, you'll see an allowance, and that allowance is always to bring the buildings up to LEED Silver. It becomes an individual district's choice based upon the values of the district and the community, whether they want to go LEED Gold or LEED Platinum. And any desire to go LEED Gold or LEED Platinum then becomes what's called an LFI, which is a locally funded initiative. So the OFCC might say, okay, and these are not real numbers, but it takes $10,000 to meet LEED Silver. We're gonna pay for that. If it takes $15,000 to meet LEED Gold, you're responsible for the extra $5,000. So that's, anyway, you understand that. I just wanted to point out our current acreage. Yes.
Can I just add to this? Because yes, LFIs continue to haunt my dreams. There are a number of things. I just want people to either know this or recall this as we talked about it before. There are a number of things, in fact, that we would have to fund entirely ourselves should we want to include them. And this became an issue when we talked about an auditorium and performance space, because that would also, pieces of that or large pieces of that would become LFI. So I just want, there's a lot out there.
That is on the Q&A, and I'll get to that. So Mills Lawn currently sits on 8.84 acres, and middle school, high school, and the building itself is 47,000 square feet and change. McKinney Middle and the high school are on 37.82 acres, and the square footage is 74,000 and change. So based upon our enrollment, what the OFCC says is we need a building of 114,000 square feet and change. So just kind of have that in your head. It's noted on every plan, so you're going to find it in multiple places. So I just want to tell you what each of the plans are. So the draft plan 1 is a new K-12 demolition of both sites. So in these plans, here's what's included. Architect fees are included, demolition, abatement, and it will say that in there in each plan. So the total project amount is $29,900,000, et cetera. You see that. This plan would be completely co-funded by the OFCC. So why is that important? It's important because your 26% only applies to the amount of the project that's eligible for co-funding.
Right.
So of that, the co-funded project would be ELP amount would be $7,793,000. And now that I'm looking at this, I hope I did 20%. I'm sure these numbers are right. But anyway, these are numbers I did based upon, I just pulled them from the OFCC documents to give you kind of a view at a glance. Draft 2 is renovation addition at Mills Lawn and selective demolition renovation addition at the middle school, high school. You can see that the total project cost is slightly less than draft 1, but it's not all co-funded. Same with draft 3 is renovation addition at Mills Lawn and renovation at the middle school, high school, no demolition. Again, 29 million total project cost, most of it co-funded. Draft 4 is selective demolition, renovation addition at Mills Lawn and the high school for a K-12 at that site. And that is higher total project cost than the completely new, and a little less co-funded. And then draft 5 is a renovation addition at Mills Lawn for a K-12, and the difference between 4 and 5 is that there's no demolition. And again, you see that's in the $30 million range with a higher LFI. Make sense? Okay. Steph, can you go to the next document?
May I ask a question, Terry?
Yes.
So between these, I think what we're not seeing on each of them is what's the maintenance tail each. Would they be different between those different 5 plans? Imagine a new building would have a lower maintenance tail than.
Right. And so as you go into each draft plan, and again, you have those in your folder, and maybe we can go through one so I can just show you what it is. And then, but you're right, you're absolutely right. So this second document is also in the folder, and it's just really kind of Q&A that I pulled from the OFCC website and my conversation and Tammy's conversation with our consultant. So on these draft plans, you're going to see something called a PALFI, which is a project agreement locally funded initiative that is different from a regular locally funded initiative. I know. So PALFI are for required design elements when there is an oversized issue. So for example, our media center is larger than the Ohio School Design Manual requirement. So that overage then becomes a deduction if we keep it. However, let's say we're going to keep the oversized media center because we like it, but to bring it to code for, let's say, safety requirements, we have to spend X amount of money. The portion of funding that we have to spend to bring it to code for safety is co-funded. Does that make, just sometimes you can just nod your head and say, yeah. So again, this is an education for Tammy and I. But anyway, that's what PALFI is. So on these plans also, you're going to see something that says 100% cap LFI equals renovation cost plus addition cost plus allowances exceed right replacement cost. Basically, the right replacement cost is the cost to build new based on proposed enrollment. So as you go through each of these plans, generally on the second page, you're going to see a line that says right replacement ratio. For plans where the right replacement ratio is above 100%, that overage becomes LFI. So what are examples? Here's your question, Steve. What are examples of LFI? Anything that's above the square footage requirements and limits in the Ohio School Design Manual. Just for kicks, because I thought you might be looking for something to do with your free time. You have the Ohio School Design Manual, the 2019 is the latest version, in the drive, and it is so big, it is in 2 volumes. So, auditorium seats are LFI. If we wanted to include board offices, let's say in some type of new construction, that would be LFI. Makes sense? There's some, and it's all spelled out. I put health centers, shared health centers, and I just want to throw this out here. Many districts in their building projects have worked with local doctor's office, medical centers to say, hey, let's do a shared health center in part of the building so that there's some offset to cost, if I'm making sense. And generally those are on the campus, but have a separate entrance, et cetera. So again, that's not that, all of that is LFI, but just so you know. CE FPI rating, that goes back to TJ, your question about what's the really performance or the assessment of systems in the building. And I'll show you exactly where that is. Again, we've talked about the waiver. Do we get new building assessments? So they're tweaked. I talked about that. The square feet include all areas. In new construction, it includes everything. Square footage requirements for so if you add up maybe our current square feet, it's more than what's recommended by the OFCC. And that's because if you're talking about a single campus, even though we could have K-6 students separated from 712, there could be shared spaces. And because there's shared spaces, you don't need that square footage that would be discrete. Talked a little bit about reprogramming. And that's typically, let's say you're going to take a high school classroom and convert it into a kindergarten classroom where there are different requirements, that's where those reprogramming costs come in. Okay, so that, and then number 9 talks about when we would get our ELP money, and I've discussed that. Does all that make sense? Have I completely overwhelmed you?
Well, there's not going to be a quiz on these acronyms at the end of this meeting, is there? Because
no quiz.
Yeah, Terry, can I just interject here? And this is, again, at a more general level. The OFCC did its building assessment for us back in 2017. You've been referring to that repeatedly, and you talked about the renovate to rebuild ratios that they use.
Right.
There was, at least among a handful of people, some suspicion of that report. And so I just want to remind people that much more recently, the board engaged a private firm to do exactly the same evaluation. They did so without looking at the OFCC's report, and what they came up with was virtually identical. So the assessment of our buildings has been done twice within the last, let's call it 3.5 years, and the conclusions are the same. So I don't think there's any way we can avoid really reckoning with the state of the buildings as they are. And the second thing that I want to just stress again, because again, I think at least a few people in the community were either suspicious of this or confused by it. The OFCC does not care one way or another what we do with our facilities. They are guardians of public money. So the only stipulation is if we want that state contribution to our project, then there are certain things we must do and certain stipulations we have to follow and guidelines we work within and so on and so forth. There was, I think, a perception somehow that the OFCC simply wanted to badger districts into tearing down old buildings and building new buildings. That is simply not the case. They are, as I said, the stewards of public money. And if they're going to give away public money, state money to our project, then they have some requirements. And I just want to make that clear again, because that was, as I said, there was some confusion about that last time around.
Yeah, you know, and I've thought a lot about that, Steve, and I think in my mind, I equate it to what's gone on during this pandemic. And that is, eventually, when people are telling you the same thing, you know, there's truth to it. And so if all of the scientists are telling me this, and I am not trained as a scientist, you know, I know enough that I'm going to believe that. And like, I'm not trained as a scientist, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. And so when people say that all along, I have to attribute some validity to that. Okay, Sylvia?
Yep. That was a little while back, but I did want to just, you had touched on the health center option when you were covering LFIs.
Uh-huh.
And I just, always feel the need to, I know that's extra and we're not really talking about it, but since it was given as an example, that really is good community public health if it's ever possible.
Yes.
So thanks for mentioning it.
No problem. I always think things like that are our responsibility to explore. So here's draft plan 1. I'm going to go through it. All of the others look like it in terms of layout and format. So I just want to show you where to find things. So this is the new build. You see these are from 2017. And we've already submitted, they've required us to submit new numbers, and we've already done that. So you can see project scope. Can you see my arrow on the screen? Can you? No, that's just me moving. Okay. Yeah, so project scope. So there's an allowance to abate and demolish. And then this is to build new K-12. And then it gives you some commentary. We are in, there's been this storm shelter requirement that has been back and forth. So depending upon when the bond issue is passed, we may have the requirement for a storm shelter. So that is included in there. And then there are allowances for, there are a lot of safety things built in that are required. One is this radio communication emergency responder coverage. You'll see sometimes, as I mentioned, lead silver allowance. Site safety improvement allowance. So when you see that, that's looking at any type of traffic changes that are necessary for ingress or egress or bus lanes or parent access. So that's what that is. Okay, Steph, can you go to the next page? Okay. Oh my gosh, this is so small. Can we make this bigger at all? Woo. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so you see the first column is what are the considerations for the middle school, high school part? What are the considerations for the elementary part? And so they have elementary, middle school because they go, there's a little break, and I think, our kind of configuration doesn't exactly match that, but that's what it is. So you see what will be demolished, and it's pretty much everything, right? That's built in. Go down, Steph, just a little bit. You remember the right replacement ratio I talked to you about? What doesn't exist here because this is a new build. Go down. And so here's where the square footage requirements are, 114. Go down. Again, there are no cost of additions because it's a new build. So on some of the other plans, you are going to see that. Go down. And then you're seeing the demolition cost, and then the building cost for each. And so that's kind of how this is set up. And the setup is the same for each plan. I want you to go to the next page, Steph. So this is specifically about the middle school, high school. So if you think about our last assessment, here's where you get those reports about the assessment of the facilities. So the site of the middle school, high school was satisfactory. Anything below 50 is going to get a poor. Structural and mechanical features, 53% borderline. Plant maintainability, borderline. Building safety and security, 55% borderline. Educational adequacy, 70%, that was satisfactory. And environment for education, 54% borderline. What I would, and I've talked to our consultant about this, I know, I got it. Again, this is an old document, so as we go into the future, these are going to be updated. Go to the next one is elementary. Anything that's borderline in the 50% in discussion with the consultant, we can probably keep going. We can probably think that it's most likely to drop from borderline to poor. And so here you see Mills Lawn. School site satisfactory structural and mechanical features, poor. Plant maintainability, borderline. Building safety and security, borderline. Educational adequacy, borderline. Environment for education, borderline. So you can see that those 4 years down the road, all of those borderline systems are most likely going to drop into poor. And this is how it's set up. Again, these are from the 2017. The numbers have been adjusted, but I do know we've had staffing changes, and that will be adjusted because the OFCC is not aware of that until we submitted recent documents. Go ahead, Steph. Keep going. And again, you see kind of what's in there for different areas. So then you see, then it gives you a worksheet for each. And again, I don't want to kind of go into all of these in detail, but this talks about the allowances. Here you see it's talking about the storm shelter, which is not a low cost, but is required. Okay. Questions about how the master plan drafts are set up. Here you see the other allowances, the site access and safety improvement, storm shelter, and the radio system. Anybody have questions about that? I think the difference between 2 through 5 is really what parts being demolished, what parts being kept, etc. And it's 2 and 3 are keeping our same configuration, 2 separate sites with variations between demolition or no demolition of parts of the building. Drafts 4 and 5 are a site, one site at the current Enon Road location, but the differences between 4 and 5 are some include demolition and one includes demolition and one does not. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
And that is kind of where we are.
So, Terry, this question may be premature. It may be something we discuss with our pre-bond architect, but I do remember, and again, being mindful of some of the issues that were raised, especially by our facilities task force people who labored so heroically. If we were to think about combining into a K through 12 campus, we have a sense that there would be operational cost savings associated with that. It would be nice to be able to project that out with some more specificity. What does it mean to have one heating system rather than 2, one cafeteria kitchen system rather than 2, et cetera? And so at some point, I think that would be helpful to have.
Okay, we can do that. And not only are there efficiencies that way, but educationally, and I want to bring us all back to the reason we need facilities is for our children. So, yep. and because we have to educate our children. And educationally, having everyone together is helpful in so many ways. We can really start to see the vertical articulation of how we grow our kids from K-12. It allows for tremendous collaboration between everybody in the district. And I think, that benefit really can't be emphasized enough. I also want to say that I've been saying all along that my opinion, my professional opinion, not personal opinion, my professional opinion, which is what you pay me to have and to discuss with you, is that I think based upon our size and our academic needs, a single campus is the way to go. Again, after community engagement and your input, the decision may be that that's not the case. But if you're going to ask me for my opinion, my professional opinion, I'm going to provide it. And not am I just going to provide it, I'm going to say, hey, here's what I think, and I think this because of all of these reasons. I also want to emphasize that to you, but you know this, but also to the public that's listening, is that there is no plan right now. And I know, Carol, I'm sure you're on here, and I thank you for your article, but what Carol articulated in her article was that my professional opinion is that a K-12 campus would meet many needs of the district. Again, we are not there. That has not been decided. One site or two sites. I mean, none of that has been decided. No property is for sale. Big property. So I want everyone to understand that. And I also want to do kind of the layman's term or the layman's explanation of this. So just for me, as an average citizen, this helps me get in line cost. So recently there was a home at Polecat in Fairfield that sold just under 1,000 square feet for, I don't know, $219. So if I say, okay, if I back that down and say $200,000 for 1,000 square feet, right? So I'm going a different direction. I mean, we're talking in the mid $20 million range if I project that out.
That house isn't built for having 700 kids bouncing up and down in it.
Correct. So schools are different, right? So I guess my point is that those costs, if you just look at cost in the village, are not out of line. And what I also provided for the board in this folder is just some fact sheets from other OFCC projects, and I only provided you K-12s. I can easily go back in and provide you elementaries and then separate middle school, high schools, because it's all available. So and I provided you K-12s for enrollment close to ours, either above or below. But for some of these districts, and I think one is Northridge, it was occupied in 2015, which meant they probably started on it in 2012 or 2013. 500 and so students, maybe 540 students, I think 85,000 square feet. At that point, it was almost a $20 million project. So project the difference in square feet between 114 and 85, project 7 years down the road, project an additional 150 students, 200 students. And so you see that it's not, these should not be unexpected costs. Not that they're minimal, but they're not kind of out of line if you really step back and look at what has happened in the past. You know, it's a different story about, you know, how are we going to pay for this, and you know, what are we going to ask of our community and our voters, and that's why Tammy had her piece. But this is kind of where we are now. I think once we get the pre-bond architect on board, we can really start thinking more specifically as we engage the community about the desire for the district's facilities.
Yeah, let me just underscore what you said. Right, the board has in no way settled on any kind of plan or direction yet. At the same time, there's a limited matrix of options here, right? One building or two, one site or the other, or both. And so in that sense, we can create a grid of possible options, and that's what you've essentially done for us. And I think that's really helpful. We're not necessarily gonna do anything. Well, as I said, I think those are the realms of possibilities here. You mentioned that as well, the board has not made any decisions, has not taken any actions, has not moved in any direction about the sale of property, and that has become a topic of conversation among a small handful of people. I want to ask the financial question. Maybe I'm going to point this at Tammy. So the district owns approximately 47 acres. If let's imagine, for example, a single building of about 100,000 square feet, that's about 3 acres. Let's say we require ultimately 10 acres or 11 acres to run parking, buses, all that other sort of stuff, which would leave us with, let's call it roughly 35 acres of total property. If the district were to sell some piece of that off, for whatever purpose, maybe it would be housing, maybe there's a commercial development, I don't know. How would that help bring down the cost of the total project? Would we just pay the bond people that money up front? How would that help bring that cost down?
Well, first of all, my understanding is if you sell the property, you can put that money in the general fund. So the board has options. But I think the intent of everybody would be to decrease that amount of the bond issue. And to me, this also becomes the same question as to the OFCC reimbursement. How does that affect the bond issue? So those are really the same question, which is what I can find out for you with our bond counsel.
Good.
And I do want to say one other thing. One option that I did not mention, and I think was mentioned certainly in my work with the facilities task force, was and I think with the bond 2018 bond campaign, and that is, what about a phased approach? One building and then the next. In my mind, if the decision is made to keep 2 sites, I would not recommend a phased approach, because I think that the need for improvements is so great in both buildings that it be done at the same time.
We settled on that last time to do the middle school, high school first, and then essentially to kick the Mills Lawn can down the road. I'm not sure any of us thought that was the best choice. It seemed to be what had the best chance of passing. We were clearly wrong about that. But yeah, I guess, I'll just say explicitly, construction costs go up, they don't go down. So every year, and they go up more than the rate of inflation, and sometimes considerably more than the rate of inflation. When we did this the last time, we had several local contractors just describe that I think the number I remember is 4.5% a year. Which clearly outpaces the cost of inflation. So the longer you put this off, the more expensive it gets. And as you said at the outset, Terry, buildings don't fix themselves. So those problems just get worse and worse. There's very little wiggle room on that front.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're totally right in that, two of the biggest arguments that and they're good ones about the last levy weaknesses in it were that it didn't address both schools, and then 2, that it didn't account for the maintenance, right? So people thought there was going to be another bill coming for the other school, and then we didn't have a properly funded maintenance plan long term. So I think addressing both of those is paramount in anything going forward.
Yeah.
So just on Terry's point about a K-12 building, one of the things we did previously was, as part of the community engagement process, was we literally bussed people to see new buildings around the Miami Valley, to get people's sort of impressions, to let people talk about to the educators in those buildings and what it meant. And I think, Terry, it was unanimous that even the educators who might have had some ambivalence about having all the kids on the same campus found tremendous value to that. And it really opened up the opportunities. So just Sylvia gave a public health sort of plug. I'm going to give human development plug here, that having a range of kids from a range of ages together offers so many more opportunities than separating them. And when we talk about lifelong skills, that is a huge, huge plus for lifelong skills and how people interact and support each other through a lifespan. So I just want to point out that, you know, we felt like that was really, really important. And we felt like it was important for the community to be able to go out and have interactions and to see new buildings so that they could better understand the importance of that. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of speak to that a little bit as well.
And
Yeah.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Well, and the other thing I wanted to say is that, you know, some of the people who have came out because of the community, the land use plan, and sort of being surprised, and, you know, they've become quite verbal about sort of their desire, but I also want to acknowledge that, you know, not only do they have a desire to keep a portion of Mills Lawn as green space as a park, but they're extending themselves in ways around really supporting and collaborating with the district. So I just want to, that feels and looks different than what was previously. Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up, you know, in the last levy debate or the lead up to it, there was, you know, some changes in plans back and forth. There were a bunch of surveys, and that, unfortunately, in the attempt of trying to include everybody, it kind of clouded the message a bit too, I think. There was a very clear signal on some of the surveys and public feedback about a single campus, but at the Mills Lawn site. And it was very specific, the feedback we got tied to that site because of congestion in the village and such. And that was one of the biggest things that was mentioned. But I don't think what we ever fully explored or really talked about was the advantages of a K-12 site at another location, whether it's out at the Enon Road or even something different. So I think that's a worthy point, that when people bring up that the town rejected a K-12, or the district did, but I don't think that that's entirely accurate. I think most of that was a gut reaction toward what was happening for a site all contained on the Mills Lawn current property.
Other questions I can answer.
Well, I guess, again, this may be, oh, sorry, TJ, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I had one, and I don't even know how big an issue this would be right away, but there's also a kind of loud chorus, maybe not loud isn't the right way, but, you know, a good point was brought up in the last levy debate about our facilities, about energy efficiency and what would happen as we took down buildings, right? And how much carbon essentially was being used to build new facilities. So it would be great to see some kind of comparison, because we talked about this a bit. When you have a brand new building, right, the energy efficiency is going to be way better than it is right now. And heating and cooling buildings is, if it's not the largest, it's one of the largest sources of carbon emissions anywhere. And we own two of the largest buildings in Yellow Springs, right? I mean, only the Bryant Center comes close. So if we really are, you know, committed, and I hope we are as a community, toward lowering our carbon, and you putting in new facilities and new heating and cooling and making the envelope of your building sealed up correctly toward new standards is a huge dent in the carbon emission of our entire community. So I think there has to be some sort of analysis offsetting what the building costs are in terms of putting in new carbon out there and versus the long-term operating, right? There's almost like a life cycle. And I think that we come out way ahead by having new facilities and new heating and cooling systems.
Yeah, that's a great point, TJ. And I'll add to that as well. I think there was some confusion last time that when you demolish a building, everything gets tossed in a landfill. And I don't think people fully understood how much of that gets recycled, the steel and all kinds of other things. So, right, I think a greater attention to the environmental questions here is a smart thing for us to do. I also wanted, and again, this may be premature, Terry, and I'm, I sort of hesitate and I groan a little bit, but when we talk about a community engagement project that begins maybe in January, I'm afraid, yes, we're talking about a virtual community engagement process, right? Right, we're not necessarily going to be able to bring everybody into the gym to have those community meetings and break out at the different tables. So you don't have to answer this question now, but I guess I just want to alert people that, we're on a timeline that we can't really much alter. And COVID is on its own timeline, which is going to play itself out. And so we'll do the best that we can. And we hope that people find ways to participate even under these circumstances.
Yeah, that would be probably, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does not mean we don't engage. And I
Right.
know that you know that we will, and just extend the opportunity to everyone to engage with us and collaborate with us. And, I want to thank the residents that I met with 2 weeks ago, because I think, these are difficult questions and difficult situations, but together we can think it through and I think come up with an end result that's good for everyone. But at the center of that and at the top of that is good for our children. And I think I want to make sure that everyone remembers that that's why we're doing this. Because honestly, a kindergartner or a first grader or a 10th grader, they don't really think so much about, well, I know they don't think at all about, can't we just make do, or what if we did this Band-Aid or all of this energy efficiency. They want a space where they can do what they need to do academically, and they also want to see a space that they see when they go out to other schools. And we've had this with our athletes where they go to schools and they're like, wow. I mean, quite honestly, some schools, they say this about the schools, just, not brand new, but they're like, wow, this is lovely. And I think kids see so much more than we think they do. And they make their own attributions into why that is. So, why are we in a building that looks like this when other kids are in this building? And so, I think it's important to just keep kids at the center of this discussion, and connected with that is what's our vision, what's our academic vision. And I think, through engagement and through open discussions where we assume positive intent on the part of everyone. As you know, I'm not on social media, but I'm readily available. So if someone has a question or a complaint, where my office is. And I try to respond to all emails and phone calls within 24 hours. Most times I take a call when I get it. So that's how we have to operate. We can't operate in any other way. So I know together we can get there. But we have to start now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Other questions, comments?
Well, Terry, my final question, and there's a lot here, that I'm going to process, and I will have further smaller questions, but I'm hoping that the slide presentations, both yours and Tammy's, can go up on the website. We are accumulating a vast amount of facilities material on that website. But I think for anybody who's watching, wants to go back to this, anybody who's not here, I think this would be tremendously helpful to have there. So I'll just make that plug.
Yeah, we're working on, we transitioned to a new website provider, and we're working on cleaning up our entire website. And so Stephanie and I have really been working on kind of building out that content, but we definitely have a facilities piece where we'll start putting all of this. So just expect that. And if you can't find something, email me or call me, and I'll make sure you get it.
Excellent.
So
Any other questions or comments or?
I would say one last thing, probably expect at the December board meeting approval of a pre-bond architect.
Good. Well, hearing no other remarks, I'd like a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Second.
Excellent. And before we call the roll, I just want to thank both of you, Tammy and Terry, for this, because, as I said at the outset, we're getting this process back on track, but I also feel like this really moved the ball forward quite a bit. This wasn't simply let's just rehash where we're at. So I'm feeling I'm really appreciative that you put in a tremendous amount of work to get us back to where we need to be. So thank you for that. And Tammy, go ahead and call the roll.
Hahn,
Yes.
Merhemick,
Yes.
Ellison,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everybody. This was great. This is,
Have a nice Saturday.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Dreams of the OFCC dancing in my head.
That's right.
Bye, y'all.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you so much.